Good to have you here, and really happy Monday is what I want to say to all of you. I am Gayleen Gray, Assistant Vice President and Chief Technology Officer at McMaster University. So once again, a big welcome to all of you. This is the first in our series of women, the summer series on women in tech, and specifically focusing on women in higher ed IT CIOs, and I'm really thrilled that I've managed to convince a few of my colleagues to participate in this series. This is following on, I would say, a successful series that I did along with my team back in February 2020, right before the pandemic started. We launched a Women in Tech series that ended up becoming a virtual Women in Tech series through the pandemic, the early part of the pandemic, where I interviewed via podcast a number of women affiliated with McMaster University who were really achieving amazing and wonderful things in research and teaching, in business as they moved on from their roles here at the institution, and really just a whole great group of individuals who are really quite innovative. And I found that to be such an inspiring activity with lots of great feedback from people who watched and participated. And just so you know, those videos are still available on our cto.mcmaster.ca website. That, of course, the pandemic carried on. We didn't extend that beyond that first round of interviews, but I sit and do brainstorming with my team on a regular basis about what do I want to do. I have done tech talk discussions through the summers over the last couple of years, and I thought this year it'd be really nice to marry both that Women in Tech series as well as the tech talks into this summer series. And so again, I'm grateful for the support that I get from my team as I come up with these harebrained ideas. Sometimes then they have to actually turn things into action, and I'm very fortunate I have such a great team that they do that. One of the things that was really fun about this particular series is that I kicked it off with a panel discussion at the Canadian Higher Ed IT Conference, which took place not very long ago in June, and we were able to record that. So had some wonderful conversation with a number of my colleagues there. Unfortunately, Jody, who's here with us today, wasn't able to join on that. However, it was still critically important for me that I was able to invite Jody to participate in the online podcast series. I've discovered that I love doing these podcasts. They're a lot of fun for me. And of course, it gives me a great opportunity to spotlight some of the people in my life who I get to engage with on a professional level, who inspire me and who I have a deep level of respect for. And so Jody's been able to join us today. So I'm really thrilled with you being here, Jody, and some interesting stories that we're going to be able to share about you and your position. And I'm going to ask you to kick off now by introducing yourself, which always guarantees that I don't screw up, locations, names, all those other good things. And I have to make sure that we get it right. And so I'm hoping that you will introduce yourself, your role, your institution, and anything else you want to tell us as we kick off this session. And again, thank you and welcome.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I feel very thrilled to be counted among Gayleen's colleagues, and also thrilled that we have enough female CIOs in Canadian higher ed that you can do this. I think that's a maybe good sign for all of us about that. So I am Jody Couch, Chief Information Officer and Assistant Vice President for Information Technology Services at Dalhousie. And I have been told the longer your title is, the less important you are. So that's a pretty long title. We'll just put that out there. I actually started remotely here just in January. So I was most recently at the University of California, Berkeley. So about a 6,000 kilometer move and a 4-hour time zone while I kicked off remotely. I just arrived here in Halifax in June. And in fact, the movers are at my house as we speak. So I got to escape that for an hour to come join you. So thank you again, Gayleen, for having me join you today. But when I get home, lots of packing. So you can think about that. I've moved my Canadian children who have never lived in Canada to Canada with me, and working on importing my my American husband as well. But I've worked in higher ed my entire career. And I love higher ed, and I like to tell people I love higher ed so much that it took me 10 years and 3 institutions to get my undergraduate degree. So any of you out there who are taking some non-traditional paths, I think that's fine as long as you get there in the end. And happy to be here with all of you today who I know love higher ed just like I do.
Thank you, Jody. What a wonderful introduction, and so many things I could dig into just in that intro itself. I think it's really funny when you think about the idea of importing people. I guess that's what you've done. And of course, in this transition from being in higher ed in the United States to higher ed here in Canada, I can't let that go. I think many people would be very curious about that. And so I am very interested in getting you to talk a little bit about that. Obviously, there is a career story behind here that you can share with us about why and how, and maybe a little bit about what might have drawn you to this. You've got Canadian children, as you've suggested, so there's just a lot in here that I think we need to be curious about. So do you want to expand a little bit on the Canadiana side of the conversation, please?
Well, totally, yes. Well, as I said, it's many paths CIOs take. I think some kind of take that business sort of path, and some take maybe more the tech path, and if we're lucky, maybe we get a little bit of both in there. So I told you it took me 10 years to get my degree. That was a little bit of time at Nipissing, some time at Waterloo. And then I finished up at Purdue University in the States. So I actually worked at Purdue full-time while I went part-time. I started there as a mainframe operator, so right around Y2K time. So if you need some COBOL help, which I hear is still in demand at some banks, I'm probably a middling COBOL programmer, but happy to jump back in. And that was really, it was a good experience, kind of kicked off third shift, running jobs, kind of understanding what made the university run technology-wise. But around that time, we're of course talking about getting off this transition, out of the mainframe and into regular, more modern technologies, I guess. Although plenty of schools are still running mainframes, and those work great for what they do. So they needed coders, and they decided they would give a bunch of us an aptitude test and train us up. And so we started training up in Smalltalk, which is a great object-oriented language. I'm sure nobody out there has ever probably coded in it, and few of you have probably heard of it. Very pure object-oriented language, very slow to code, which is not what you need when you're coding a student information system from scratch. So after a few years of that, we decided to just buy something. But I got that kind of, I think, started my sort of love of technology and being able to code things to do whatever you wanted them to do, and how to kind of bend over backwards to make the university run, which was great. So, I had that chance, and eventually got to manage a coding group. Eventually became the director of IT for housing and food services, which was where I realized I am a great jack of all trades. I like to do a little bit of everything. And I probably don't want to specialize in anything. Maybe it's a short attention span or something. I think many of us as CIOs are probably like that. I think we like to kick things off and get initiatives started, and then let better people than us kind of carry those through to conclusion. So decided, well, I should get an MBA as well, because again, love higher ed, and what's a few more years of that. So I did that as well, and I got to move around the States a little bit to a few research universities. So some time at UT Austin and a little bit of time at UC Santa Cruz before landing at UC Berkeley. But I've always wanted to return home. My goal was at least to get my kids to go to school in Canada. So keep that in mind while I'll tell you that last summer, when my boss, who's the CIO at Berkeley, Jen Stringer, who's great. I'm sure Gayleen must know Jen. Yes, fantastic. She'd be great for your series too, Gayleen. So Jen, really fantastic. She asked me, well, do you like it here? How's your role going? I told her, love Berkeley. I'm sure I'll be here for a few more years, unless the CIO job at Dalhousie opens up. And so life goes on, trying to convince my 12th grader that he needs to go to school in Canada. Let's look at Dalhousie. So we get on the website, and there's the CIO job posted. So I figured, well, that's manifesting your own destiny.
That's crazy. What a weird thing, right? Oh,
so funny. Yes. So, and they weren't doing tours at the time, but we came and kind of did our own tour. So he looked for himself, and I looked like, do I really want to work here? And then, applied, and here we are. So had the opportunity to return home. I'm a Maritimer by birth, so I was born in Newfoundland. My mom lives in New Brunswick, so just a few hours away. So it's a great chance to return home, and kind of a good time to leave the States as well, if many of you follow all the wild things going on there. So it's great to be back here with all of you.
Oh my gosh, that is a great story. And I love the serendipity that you just, we never really know how things are going to turn out, but it's great when you have a goal in mind and suddenly the universe opens up that opportunity. And yes, I do know Jen Stringer. In fact, she and I sat on a review panel for an institution not that long ago. And it was really funny when having that conversation with her, Jody, she said, hey, my colleague, and she was very sad to lose you. I just want to make that point. She, indicated that you were joining. So this is sort of, all these people and places coming together. So thank you for that. There are, again, so many things I could dig into. One of the things I did want to talk about, and maybe this is going to be a straw poll of you. So my impression, because I am very fortunate and I have a lot of colleagues who are in the United States through my EDUCAUSE affiliations, what have you, and past ResNet symposium affiliations. It seems like people in the US, our colleagues down there, move around a little bit more from institution to institution. And I don't know if that's just, I happen to meet all of those people, but there does seem to be a bit more mobility. I've been in another institution other than McMaster, the University of Guelph, prior to coming here, but I was there for 18 years before I came here. And many of my colleagues across the country, those are your colleagues now too, Jody, seem to be a little bit more stay put, if I can, I don't know what the terminology would be for that. What do you think? Like, is this a truth that in the US people feel a need or desire or getting recruited more? What's going on?
That's a good question. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of roots, right? Like, do you land roots and kind of stay there, or are you somebody that more wants to maybe experience living a bunch of different places? I don't know if it's more not. I mean, there's a lot more Americans, I guess, right? There's 10 times as many.
So, and there's more schools too.
And way more schools, yeah. Right? Even just where I lived in California, within 2 hours, probably 6 or 7, relatively large schools that you could make it to. So yeah, so maybe there's something to that a little bit, or maybe the recruiting might be a little bit harder as well, since you have a lot more types of institutions, I think, in the States, or a lot of private schools and a lot of other things all competing. So there may be some pull to that as well.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I think it is quite fascinating from that perspective. We see positions, if any of you out there are sitting on any of the EDUCAUSE lists, it's a constant trickle of opportunities that are coming by at all times in all different institutions and all different positions these days, as we're all heavily recruiting for people to join our teams. So anyway, so fascinating stuff. So and just to touch a little bit, it's still on the move, because I have done a move recently, although not for time zones or across, from coast to coast. Was there any thought to not bring everything and start over and buy fresh, or, and was there anything that well, I guess you don't know yet if you're still unpacking. It's quite interesting how long it's taken to actually get to the unpacking part of things, but that's the way the world turns as well. Anything that was near and dear to you that you had to leave behind for one reason or another?
It's actually funny you say that. So it was about 6 weeks, I think, from when they packed our things to now. But we moved into our house here in Halifax June 24th, so which is a month, right? So it's been air mattresses and camping chairs and a lot of eating out, I guess, for the last month, which, if you've been to Halifax, easy to eat out here. Lots of great restaurants, especially in the summer. So come visit. Will be but don't stay, I think, is what we're supposed to say. Come visit, but don't stay. But it's a great place for that. Because we've moved a few times kind of over the last couple of decades, we're pretty good packers. I think I'm a little bit of a minimalist. It was funny as they were unpacking our things this morning, the number of boxes labeled garage that were my husband's. I think there was many going into the basement as there were going into the house. But I did leave behind my piano, and I could have brought it along with me, but the folks that bought our house, the young, maybe 14, 15-year-old son there fell in love with the piano that was sitting in the room, and so we made a deal to leave that behind. So I know it's going to get a lot of love there, and there are some piano stores here, I'm sure. So that will be one of my first purchases to pick up, I think.
Right on. Well, and I guess in the technology thing, you could always just, get some sort of an app, can't you, to do piano stuff like that?
Not exactly.
Clearly, I don't play the piano, so I have no clue. But anyway, I'm just throwing that out there as an idea. Yeah, so I think pianos and pool tables, aren't they the things that go into a house and never come back out again? I think there's some.
That's exactly right. Yes. And Peloton bikes. I said mine is. I did bring that along, but that's in pieces. Maybe when I get home, it'll be put together. But there was thought maybe that should just stay where it was.
Yeah, I know. I've got one of those too, and I agree with you. They're a little unwieldy, but they are also really nice to carry along. So, well, a lot has changed for you, and obviously residentially, you're going back to your roots, which is very cool. Your kids are experiencing something completely new, and I think as a family, obviously you're getting a chance to try out all the restaurants, so you'll have your favorites. There's a great Indian restaurant that I really love in Halifax, on that hill. I don't know if that's still there or not, but so you will be a good person to go to for any restaurant recommendations. Of course, obviously you came, the position drew you, and again, manifesting from a long time, so that's awesome. Talk a little bit about what that's like when you pick up and move, not just institutions, but you've moved to a whole new geographic and also system outside of the United States now and here in Canada. What's it been like? What's the first 30 days been like? Is there anything unique or different that you've made note of about Canadian higher ed IT compared to what your experiences were in the US?
Yeah, so I have to say, I know people at McMaster are great, but the Dal people are really exceptional. So really, really excellent people here. Very kind, very welcoming. I laughed because we do a daily stand-up, which was virtual for me for the first while. And they would talk about the temperature in Fahrenheit and Celsius for me, right? So they would put that kind of stuff up. So there's that kind of stuff with moving a country, even two countries, as geographically similar, but some differences. The metric system and the money being different, and goodness, trying to get a bank account, a Canadian bank account from the States. I don't wish that on anyone. But besides all those mechanics, the biggest differences to me have been just how collaborative I think folks have been here all across the country. So our, the CIOs have been so welcoming and open. It's been really great that way. And so for my first 30 days here, I just listened. As much as I know, Gayleen, I think you're like me, you want to just jump in and start doing things, but I really made the plan that I was going to just listen. I met with lots of staff individually and in groups, the deans, leaders across campus, and just try to understand why are we doing the things we're doing, and what are our goals, and what are the things we want to be working on. I think everybody's been through the pandemic, and it's such a trying time that just being stable, keeping things running, putting out good IT, but making it kind of what you expect, and not doing anything too wild. And what I really got from people is they're just ready to innovate, ready to try some agility, ready to shake off, I think, some of that pandemic cobwebs and try and do some new things. So it was very exciting to see that when I came here. I think we've all realized as a group, the stability is never not important. Everybody needs to be able to get on the network when they want to, keep secure systems, but just this sort of excitement, I think, is starting to come back to IT folks on campus. One of the things for me, though, has been acronyms. So trying to learn all the new acronyms, and the FOIPOP is my favorite. So that is my one of my new ones that I've been learning. So instead of a FOIA in the United States, you get a FOIPOP here in Canada, which just sounds much more fun. The Freedom of Information kind of Act. So it's been, it's been good learning all of that stuff. But again, everybody's been so kind and welcoming. Nobody ever, I think, makes me feel like I don't know something. People are pretty good about making sure they bring me up to speed.
That's really nice. And it's always great to shout out to your team for sure. And you're right, the Mac people are really nice as well, but I'm sure the Dalhousie people are so
I mean, the Dalhousie people are just a little bit better, but just a tiny bit.
Well, we get to know people so well, and one of the things we know within our own institutions as well as across the country is there's just a lot of really hardworking people who have to deliver on this wonderful world of technology and services within our institutions, and most of them go as unsung heroes behind the scenes. So we say thank you a lot, don't we, Jody, to the people who continue to keep the wheels on and ensure that that network and everything that is attached to it works as well as it should and does. So yes, great. And it's great that you've had those opportunities. I think, one of the things you've highlighted around acronyms, I think anybody who starts in higher ed period has to go through an onboarding process and needs to have a glossary. And then when you layer on the technology components of that, to your point, there are some things that are similar and different as well. You had talked to, so of course, letting everyone know, transparency and behind the scenes view here, we do actually talk about these conversations before we have them, just so that we can sort of feel out some topics and make sure that nobody's caught completely flat-footed on their side of things. So one of the things we talked about that I think is relevant to the fact that you're recently joining Dal, and there's lots of interest in innovation moving forward, has to do with strategy. I'm wondering, and people in my world, and I know across Canada, many institutions have IT strategies, and they may be at the beginning, middle, and or end, or rejuvenating them and what have you. You also talked a little bit about some strategic undertakings there. So maybe you can talk to us a little bit about your digital strategy, I think is how you're naming it there, Jody, and just give us a heads up on what's happening at Dal.
Yes, so I've been really lucky to come in right at the beginning of this digital strategy. Campus has a new president, new provost, lots of new leadership, and worked on our third century promise. So as Dalhousie moves into its third century, what kind of institution does it want to be, and what is the strategy of the university? And one of the pillars really included a lot about technology. So how do we make sure that our digital environment is going to work for all the campus constituents? And that has spun out into its own digital strategy. Really important to note, I think, that although my predecessor certainly was a big part of helping put that together, it really was not an IT-driven strategy. So it was very much a listening tour. It's very user-focused. So what do students need to engage with the campus? How do we get over the digital divide for them? How do we make sure that staff are digitally engaged and up to speed and able to learn new things quickly? How do we make sure that the tools we have on campus are working best for everybody? And so when I arrived, we had objectives and we had some goals, but we really hadn't started to put the plan into play yet. So what I've gotten to do my first 6 months here is to really work with lots of smart folks across campus on what are the things that tactically we could do to help bring these goals and objectives forward. And we are focusing around we have 5 pillars as well. The strategies always have 5, right? Although I see 3 things behind you, so 5 here at the Maritimes. So we have a focus on students and their needs. Again, the digital divide, making sure that they can get what they need from campus. A focus on staff, lifelong learning, making sure that we have the tools available to them that they need to use, that we're training in things like cybersecurity and keeping campus safe. We have a group around research, of course, and critically important at any of our campuses, and where I think that the big questions are going to get answered: climate change and feeding the planet and all of those things, to make sure that we're supporting those researchers. And then we have a community pillar, so for our alumni and managing the kind of town and gown relationship with the communities that we're in. And then at foundations, which is maybe what needs to go first. So how do we handle governance? How do we think about priorities? How do we work on creating efficiencies so that staff can do the interesting work that they want to do? And so it's been great to just get to jump right in with that. My predecessor was the Dean of Engineering here at Dal, and kind of took the role for a short term, and he still remains on campus. So he's been great to be able to tap into and get more of the background details on this. But I think maybe the end point of the digital strategies, it's not a checklist, it's a way to think about being more agile and a way to think about how we're going to operate, how we're going to be lifelong learners, because technology changes so quickly that whatever checklist we make today is out of date, right, and probably tomorrow. So I think it's more about how we think and work than necessarily the tasks that we check out, although we'll be doing that too. But I think our real gift from it is going to be the way that we work together.
Yeah, I think that's so. I met Josh, who's your the interim, and I thought one of the things that was really interesting, and I'm sure has helped you as well, is he did a bit of a listening tour, but he went across Canada also, which is quite fascinating. So I'm wondering when you're coming to Hamilton so we can have a chat in person as well. So I don't know if you've thought about that, and it's not something that I had really thought about, but it is quite fascinating for an individual taking on any new CIO role, especially when you're talking about a whole new institution, for you, a whole new sector in essence. I mean, very much similarities across the board. Did you talk to Josh about that at all? Like what that kind of showed or told him, and how has he managed to parlay that into some of the things that you've talked about as far as the digital strategy goes?
Yeah, I think with Josh, part of the beauty is that he was an academic, right? He did not grow up on this administrative side of the house. I mean, he was an administrative dean, of course, but he teaches, he still teaches. So he really, I think, understands the mission of campus, and his listening tour got him a chance then to hear the other side, I think, so to go around and talk to lots of different CIOs. I've had the chance to have some conversations virtually, of course, since we are in pandemic times, but I would love to make that in person as well. And he really did encourage me to do that. So if we can figure out how to get to Hamilton without going through Pearson, because I hear that's not something you want to do. In fact, on my way here from Vancouver, they lost my bags, of course, in Pearson. So they showed up eventually, but I want to avoid that, Gayleen. So once
well, there's tons of airports around here, so I think we can do that. I don't know if there's a direct from Halifax to Hamilton, but somebody on
I think there is actually.
will know the answer to that question. So dump it in the chat, everybody. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, just a small aside on travel and Pearson Airport, it's really kind of a shocking reality that we're at a time when that has become an avoidable circumstance. It used to be one of the things I thought was so great here, that Pearson, which is the doorway to everywhere in the world in one direct flight, has become such a hardship that I think they will right themselves. That's my advice, but there are other ways to get around, of course.
That's true. I think we'll get there. I actually lived in North Bay, Ontario, for a while, so I'm not unfamiliar with the area, but
the funny thing about living in smaller places is airlines get funny joke names that go with them. And I think there was something called Scare Air that used to fly up to Nipissing. Isn't there Bear Air or something? Anyway, I've been on some of these small flights and you're like, people have stories.
You should just drive up Highway 11 in that case, right?
It's always possible, yeah. So just with regards to the digital strategy, just before we move on from that particular topic, although I know it will pepper everything that you're thinking about these days, because that's the way these strategies tend to roll. How have you, knowing that was kicking off and it's now under your umbrella, how have you inculcated the digital strategy into your own thinking, but into the conversations that you're having with your team? Because that is something for us, people can be quite often very operationally focused. They've got the things that they need to do. And we always know there's a real value in trying to connect people back to the bigger picture, both when they're willing, and also we can sometimes, force that to happen because it's stuff that we have to think about more regularly and ensure that we've got everyone's back on keeping things moving in the right direction. What are you doing around those conversations, Jody?
Yeah, and it's a really good point, because sometimes these strategies become so lofty and so just big that it does get hard for anybody to really see themselves in that. And so, luckily ours is, I think, a little bit more, I don't want to say practical because it's still aspirational, but it's definitely something where I think a lot of folks in their roles can see their place. So in ITS in particular, what we've done is we've gotten together and taken the digital strategy and other things, maybe more, removing technical debt type things that probably don't come up in the digital strategy that we would like to do, and created our goals for ITS as well. It very much in support of the strategy and clearly linked, but also kind of more maybe meaningful for us in our daily work. And we've been working now to use those to help everybody create their own goals. And note what strategy item these things tie back to, so we really all can see what is the specific work that we're doing and how does that tie in to really support these objectives of campus. Everything we do in ITS has to do that, right? It has to support campus's strategy, and it's just important for us to be able to see that. We're bad at not doing things, at stopping things in IT. I know, hopefully you don't have a modem bank. But I was speaking to a CIO who I think just turned off their modem bank maybe a couple of weeks ago.
Okay, we're not naming names, everybody. So
not naming names.
Question, nobody's going to know.
But we're just bad at stopping things, and so we've been doing a little bit of that too, is talking about what could we stop doing, and what could your colleague stop
doing? Hard though, right, Jody? Like how do we do that? Because there's always somebody out there who's relying heavily on that thing, whatever it is, or there's old systems that are supporting it and what have you. So what do you think? Like, is that something that you feel like, being sort of the new sheriff in town, do you have a little bit more agency to be able to say no to things?
Oh, well, so saying no to things isn't hard. It's stopping doing things you're already doing. I think that's hard, right? Because, and we don't really say no, do we? We say, yes, I could do that, but we're going to need 5 staff and $1 million, right, to make that happen. But when we do have these things that we've been doing, we maybe put a lot of effort into them. It takes up a lot of staff time, and there probably are some people that really do depend on those services. Yeah. But I think that's where we do want to act a little bit more like a business. Like what are the benefits that we're getting out of this, and what's the problem that we're trying to solve with it, I think is one of the questions. So Purdue University, actually, when I worked there, we had a modem bank, which was not as crazy as having one now, but it was still well past its prime. And we realized, well, we've got 10 faculty members that call into this modem bank. It's costing $80,000 a year to run. Let's just buy them internet service, right? It's cheaper. It gets this off our plate. It solves the problem. It meets the need. So I think for us right now, it's looking at what are some things that we're doing that historically we did for a really good reason. But now maybe there's some other way to accomplish that, or some other way that we could do that. It might be paying somebody else to do it. It might be meeting the need in a different way, but nobody's going to show up with to double our staff, right? So the only way we ever do something new is to figure out how to do something old more efficiently, or to stop doing it. So we are trying to focus on looking to the future and still meeting the needs of campus, of course, but doing it maybe in a more efficient way.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I had seen that there is a question about the digital strategy specifically. So I'm going to jump in and share that question with you. And that had to do with who came up, or which group. And I think it's been a collaborative effort from what I understood from you. But how about that buy-in from the admin and academic and research side, or what we can lovingly call the business side of our institutions? So it's not IT for IT's sake. You've obviously, there's been some real engagement there. What did that look like, and how did you, and how will you, do you think, continue to engage? And thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. It was very purposefully not run by IT. So while Josh, my predecessor, was a participant, he did not run it. There's a great program manager out of our Office of Analytics and Planning that kind of keeps the thing running and gets our groups together. Each of those 5 pillars has 1 or 2 leads. I'm a co-lead on 2 of them with somebody who's not in IT, and then all the other pillars are not run by IT people. So a lot of engagement on work groups, but what we've really done is given ownership of each of those pillars to people on campus that aren't just working out of IT. Our Dean of Libraries is a huge participant. Our registrar, vice provost for student affairs, we have academic representation. So just folks from all over campus that gets together to kind of move this thing forward. I definitely have a vested interest in it. I think a lot of the work will come out of my office, but we're quite a distributed campus IT-wise as well. So there is a big hope as part of this digital strategy to do a lot of community building. We need folks to take care of the niche issues in a faculty that we might have, to help us kind of spread the IT standards and to help people do what they need. And I think this lets us pull together the whole technology community on campus, not just those that happen to report up to central IT as well.
Yeah, that's great. And that sounds very familiar to many of us also, which is wonderful. And that culture community piece is always one of the joys of the work that we do, is being able to have those really strong relationships. So let's talk a little bit about mentorship and sponsorship, if you want. We touched on this at the Can Hype panel, talking about mentors, the value of mentors, the value of being a mentor. And I'm wondering for yourself, you mentioned Jen Stringer, who is your CIO at UC Berkeley. Have you a mentor? Have you had mentors? What does that look like? Did you initiate them? Like, however you want to share the story around that. I think it's always inspiring for people who maybe have never had the experience of either asking for or finding themselves in a situation of being mentored, whether it's with a peer or somebody who's more senior to them in an organization. So I think it'd be really helpful for our audience just to kind of hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah, I've had so many mentors, and probably very few of them have known they were my mentor, right? I think you kind of get out and you'll find people that you can learn things from, and you try and convince them to help you do that. I've never had a formal mentor where it was kind of an agreement or through a program, but tons of people that have helped me get where I'm getting, and maybe I'll mention a couple of them. I do think I always like to point out when I talk about mentorship that there's a big difference between mentorship and sponsorship as well. Of course, mentorship is great. It teaches you how to do things. It tells you stories. It gives you lessons to learn from. but sponsorship is so important, especially for people who are underrepresented, perhaps, who maybe don't see themselves in leadership type roles, to make sure that we're not just making paths for people who are like us, which is an easy trap to fall into, but also searching out that people aren't like us, because it's scientifically proven a diverse team is a better team, right? I would take a diverse team over a team of homogenous experts any day. And so I think it's our roles, no matter where you are in the institution, is to help people kind of get there. I have had the chance to be a formal mentor in some programs. I have to say, it's one of the most flattering things, I think, is to be asked to be a mentor, or to have someone come to you for advice. So if you are thinking there's somebody out there that you would love to tap into, I would always encourage you to do that. It's possible they may be too busy right now, but I bet if you ask, they'll help you find someone, even if they can't take the role, that might be able to help you do that. So I would never shy away from that. So some great mentors that I've had. Jen is, I think, a great one, as you mentioned. She's definitely on my list. She is someone who really taught me that the community aspect of what we do is just so critically important. Berkeley was a very distributed place. I think many more folks outside of IT than in central IT. And I think some people would buck against that, try and centralize, try and figure out how to make those people, do what you wanted them to do. But generally, I think had a gift of making that a community and figuring out how to work together and how to use everybody's own strengths. And I've taken that into my career as I've moved forward. It's just a much more powerful, better place to be than to try and be kind of a know-it-all, I think, about technology on campus. I have a great mentor, someone he just finally retired, I think, although he's retired a couple times, from Purdue University. His name was John Sauter. He was the vice president for housing and food services when I started there, and I was a junior programmer. And I remember in one case I made a kind of bad mistake, kind of with data that I shared, and it wasn't correct, basically, and it was taken to kind of an important meeting. And I just remember him being very kind about it. I had this fear that, oh no, I'm going to get fired. I've done this thing. I've been here a year, and this is terrible. But just very kind about how we make mistakes. He's made mistakes. You're not going to make the same mistake again. So yeah, I think that real ability. He was a very strong leader, a very courageous leader, but also a very kind leader. Which I think is so important, that ruling with caring about people and helping people get where they want to be, instead of ruling with kind of fear and an iron fist, which just nobody wants that, right? It's not fun for the person doing it. It's definitely not fun for the people in the org. And one more great mentor that I had, Doug Foster. He was a associate vice president, also at Purdue when I was there, but not my boss at the time, which was nice. So good to get a leader kind of in a vertical that's not your own. And what I learned from him is not to take things too seriously. So when his mailbox would get full, his inbox, he would just delete everything. And he would tell me if it was important, they'll get back to me. So he liked to move fast. He worked hard, a great leader, but also, life is going to go on. Don't take it too seriously. Do a really good job, but have fun while you're doing it, which I think I've carried forward as well.
I love that. So I call that email bankruptcy, and I have made that recommendation to people on a few occasions. Just delete it all. Like, really, everybody.
Have you ever done it, Gayleen? Have you ever done it?
I have. Well, what I've done is I've taken everything and just dumped it in a folder that I might look at again sometime. But there is the reality. We don't get away with this all that often, but it is really true. People either sort it out or they get back to you. And so when we're on vacation, you realize that you got to start always with the freshest thing, because things have a way of sorting themselves out, and people do, if they need something, they definitely can go and nudge you again for information. But it's I've made that recommendation. I think Bo maybe took that on at one point.
I can see that.
But anyway, yeah. So, I do also sometimes live by my father's idioms, and one of his was "do as I say, not as I do." But so I'm full of great advice. Sometimes it doesn't mean I always follow my own advice, unfortunately. Yes. There is another question for us, which is about digital transformation. And planning for digital transformation, what you think the needs of your institution is, or more broadly, what our collective institutions are driving that change. And maybe you can give one or two things. And then I do want to point out to everybody else, you're welcome to ask questions. There's a couple more things that I want to poke at Jody about as well, but I do want you all to feel free, if you've got some burning questions, to put them into the Q&A. So digital transformation, we know that's terminology, Jody, that's used, but really is pretty broad in terms of what it actually means. But have you been thinking at all about what's changed in the institution, maybe especially on the heels of the pandemic, that will be critically important for us from higher ed IT perspective?
Yeah, it's such a great question. It's sometimes the words digital transformation are a little bit overused, but nobody can think of a better description for it. So I still use the words digital transformation as well. I think it might be Educause has a really good chart where they show digitizing, digitalizing, and then transforming, right? So, and during the pandemic, I think we did a lot of the first two, right? We figured out how to get pieces of paper that used to float across people's desks online. And then maybe we started to figure out how to do some workflow, right? So we scanned a PDF and started emailing it. And then we figured out, maybe we can do some other things to sort of start automating this. And then the transforming kind of side of things really is, it's taking it a different step. Like maybe a human being doesn't need to look at this piece of paper at all. Maybe we can use role-based ideas to give people the data they need before they even ask for it. And so it's an interesting place to get to. And I think part of what I was talking about before was needing to figure out what we can stop doing or how we can do things differently, so we have time to focus in on what really is going to be transformative for us here in higher ed. We know we all need to do more around security and securing campus. Folks out there they want our data, they want what we have. So how can we use new technology to help us focus in on that, I think is an important thing for us to do. How can we make everybody else's workflow, everybody's workload on campus is increasing, not just in technology. How can we help those folks get their jobs done so they can focus in the more interesting and value-added work as well? So for us, that's a little bit of figuring out how to be willing to fail at things, which is hard for anybody in IT, but to try things. Did it work? If it didn't, throw it out and feel great about that. You learned something, and that's not something that's in a lot of our DNA, I think, as IT practitioners on campus. So working that sort of model in, looking for pilots, figuring out how to move a little faster and try things while still maintaining security and accessibility and all of the important things that we need to pay attention to is going to be important for all of us. And because we are such a collaborative bunch, I think we have the extra value of it's not the 200 of us on a campus, it's the thousands of us across the country that really are doing that together.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we learned so much from each other. You talked about that earlier, how we collaborate and share, and higher ed IT generally is like that, certainly in Canada, because in a sense, we're very big in from a geographic perspective, but the numbers are a little bit more manageable, if I can say it like that, from a collaboration and sharing perspective. So, I don't know if this ties into this. You and I were exchanging some thoughts on things. And so, I'm going to have to throw this at you because I'm totally curious about the concept of, and this is coming, retrofuturism. So, we're thinking about digital transformation in the future, but what's retrofuturism and what does that mean to you? And how does that fit into all of this?
Yes, okay, because I'm a good nerd, like I know many of you out there are, I love looking at pictures or cartoons or stories about what people thought the future was going to be like. And a lot of these, if you look at stuff from the 50s or 60s, 2020 is the future, right? We are here where we were supposed to have our flying cars and all of those things. So I love looking at, I guess, the human brain's capacity in some cases of how to make that leap and how bad we are at it. So I was looking at one which was about newspapers. So it was the newspaper of the future. So one drawing was of a radio that would print out a newspaper for you. So this was very futuristic. So that was a bit of a miss. But then there was another that was displaying a paper on a television. It's like, well, that's actually pretty close to what we do now. But it's using kind of the technology that they have in the day. You'll find a lot of the times it's just that everything becomes curvy in the future. So, things were square, like a fax machine was a square, and in the future, it's going to be this curvy kind of thing, but we're still going to have them, of course. I was thinking nobody envisioned the iPhone, right? That we were going to have this super powerful, more powerful than all the computers that had come before it. device that had all of the knowledge of the universe in the palms of their hand, and what a change that was going to make for us. But people had bits and pieces of it. So if you watch James Bond had a texting watch. Now it came out on a metal scroll, the text that would come out of his watch, but he had his Apple Watch before they were cool. Or a lot of voice activated assistants. Now, probably like the rest of you, you swear at yours all the time when they don't get exactly what you mean. But if you step back and think about it, like, this computer is understanding my natural human language and providing me all of this information. So I just love thinking about that, and looking at what futurists think now is going to happen in 50 or 60 years is just very fascinating. It's just the idea that we can make great plans, but making a 10-year IT plan is just silly, right? Your plan needs to be that we're going to adapt, and we're going to be agile, and we're going to keep learning, not a specific thing that you're going to do.
Yeah, but I mean, it is fun, to your point. If you like sci-fi or anything, that really generates that kind of thinking. And some of the things that we, to your point, I think some people had some pretty good ideas about some of what we might see in play now. And now we're really at a time when we can go back to some of those childhood memories even, and think, how could I make something like that more realistic or more plausible within our environment? So thank you for that. And I think I'm sure there's other people who maybe haven't used the term retrofuturism, but are definitely aligned with you in your idea about how we look at what was thought of and what's come to fruition in reality now. And yeah, hopefully as we move forward, it doesn't take hundreds or tens of years, but we can look back in a couple or 2 years and say, wow, we really have accomplished something. And I think that piece, maybe you can talk a little about celebrating success. Is that something that you have an intentionality around? I talk about that quite a bit here. I think it's really important for us to remember we are getting things done, even though it feels like a constant stream of more things to do. What do we do to celebrate, Jody? What's a celebration for you, if you could envision one?
Yeah, no, I love to celebrate success. It's a joy, right? All the things that we do for campus, that they have no idea that we do for them even, and that they would never think to maybe notice us for, but we can notice each other. So I love peer kudos, when your coworker has done something great, and love to share those kinds of things. Now that maybe we can get together a little bit more, I think we're looking forward here at Dalhousie to an event that we'll have in August, where we'll have central IT, and we'll invite anybody else that does IT around campus as well to get together and celebrate our success. Different people like to be celebrated differently, of course, right? So some people love a big public kudos, and some people that is the worst thing that could happen to them. So I think understanding that about your staff is really important as well. What I love is to get kind of private kudos, or where people tell me that a staff member did something really great, and to be able to share that. So I try and do that as well, right? So when you have a really great interaction with HR on campus, or somebody in finance is able to help you clear up a problem, I think doing that on campus is really kind of nice for the culture and nice for the atmosphere. And then trying to do other things, like making sure we build time for people to do professional development is kind of a way of celebrating them as well, making sure that we provide resources and time so people can go to training or develop themselves too. Unfortunately, we don't generally get to give out stock options here in higher ed, but we can certainly buy what we're selling with education, and make sure that people have lots of access to that.
That's great. And yes, education is part of what we do, so it's good to be able to support that. So there's been some other interesting questions that have come in. Some of them may be a little bit more involved than we'll have time for, because we are rounding into our last 5 minutes here. I just wanted to draw your attention to them. One of the things I'd like you to do, if you would be willing to, is to recommend a book that you feel a new team leader would benefit from, maybe something that you've tapped into as you've embarked upon new leadership roles over your career. And then I can touch on what some of those other questions are, and see if there's something there that you can respond to before we come to a wrap.
Yes, so books, you always know somebody's going to ask you this question, so I'll be real transparent here. I love to read sci-fi. I don't love to read business books, but I do have a couple good ones. I do make myself read some good business books. I tend more to articles and podcasts and blog entries, probably more. That probably comes back to that attention span kind of issue that I've mentioned. So I've read, I think 3, maybe 4, probably 4 pretty good business books in the last year, or nonfiction type books. So I'm going to run through all 4 of those really fast for you, and then you'll maybe have some ideas that people might want to look at. One was Necessary Endings by Henry Cloud. It's a little paternalistic, so if you read it, take it with a grain of salt, but a really good book about how endings aren't necessarily bad. Sometimes they are needed for everybody to be able to grow. For if you sink a lot of effort into something that's just not working, maybe you get something that's not working a little less badly, but it's still probably not working, right? But if you put a lot of effort into things that are working well, then you can really, really grow. So, so that was a recent one I've read. Radical Candor by Kim Scott. That one's pretty name droppy. She really likes to talk about working at Microsoft and Google. So if you can get by that, similarly, kind of good. It's if you're holding something and you want to give somebody some feedback, just give it to them right away. Don't wait. Don't let it build up. Feedback is a gift. It's one of the best things somebody can give you is when things are not going well, or there's an issue that you could resolve. There's really nothing better than being told that, I think. And so it's encouraging you to do that with others as well. How to Be Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi, really good one. So I think all of us want to do better. We want to learn more. And it's a nice way to not make people that are doing all of this labor of teaching other people how to be supportive and how to be an ally. Go read a book. Somebody put this book together for you. Read that, and I think it'll give you some good practical tips on how to be a better ally. And then the last one, which I did actually really love, Machiavelli for Women. It's by Stacey Vanek Smith. It's kind of lighthearted, tongue-in-cheek, but a lot of how could you use these, early Machiavelli learnings as a woman in any type of business field to kind of get where you want to get and be where you want to be. So it's pretty fun that way.
Those are fabulous. Great recommendations. Thank you. And I love that. I love the Machiavellian thinking and methodology. So I'll have to go and find that one for myself as well. So thanks for those recommendations. So the other 2 questions are a little bit more back to, I think, planning and innovating and trying to come up with opportunities to move our strategies forward. So I just want to drop them for your awareness. One has to do with data governance and artificial intelligence within higher education. And it was sort of a overarching, what's your thoughts on those? The other one, and thank you everyone for the questions that you brought forward. The other question was about leveraging design thinking techniques. And, it's interesting. I think design thinking is something that we have awareness around and people have flirted across, but to do it well is actually a little bit more effort than just sitting down and saying that we're going to, map out journeys and what have you. There's some good work there, and we've done some work here on this campus with IBM before, who's come in to do some workshops. So any thoughts about any of those? And then we'll take a beat and do a wrap up on that. So I know throwing a whole lot of ideas at you, but any thoughts that you might have just before we close out?
If somebody could answer those questions in 30 seconds, that would be.
Yeah, that's what we'd like.
But I'll give you a real quick one. Data governance, AI, machine learning is the only way that we're going to get things done on our campuses, I think, with our dwindling, resources and kind of constraints around that. So really important. Part of our digital strategy includes a big section about data and leveraging campus experts too, because we have smart people that are doing research and work in all of these. So how do we help leverage those people on campus to be able to get us where we need to get? Same thing with design thinking. Not a new technique, but somewhat new to lots of us in higher ed for sure. And we probably have experts on campus that can really teach us how to do that well, how to think about things, how to be people-centric. And I think is another way that you'll hear that too. But much like project management and system administration, it's a trained skill. And so important for us to embrace that learning and get the training in it to be able to do it right, to be able to get where we need to be.
Well, you did a pretty good job in so I think that's a good wrap on those. But thank you for those questions, because they are really important for us to continue to think about new ways of approaching some of the same problems. But we really want to move things forward exponentially now. So thanks to everyone who shared questions. And it is now my job to wrap us. You've been amazing, Jody. Thank you so much. What a thrill. And I've learned a ton of things, and I have many more things I'm going to be able to ask you about as a result of this interaction. So thanks for making time for that. So Jody, thank you. You've been a real gem to have, and I'm really appreciative of you as a colleague as well in this summer series, Women in Tech, and specifically focusing on CIOs here in Canadian higher ed IT. Jody, final word over to you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. It's been really fun. Always fun to think about, step back for a moment from all our daily work and think about leadership and how we're interacting. So thrilled to have had the chance to chat with you all. And hopefully I'll come visit y'all in Hamilton before too long.
Okay, well, you know I'm going to be all over that, so we'll make that happen for sure. Thanks again. Great to see you. Happy unpacking. I know you got your work cut out for you, so enjoy.
Thanks so much.
Thanks again, everybody. Great to see you.